One morning, just as the sun touched the edges of the Bridgerton estate, something strange happened. Lady Violet received a letter with no return address, sealed with a golden crest no one had seen before. She read it once, then twice. Her face lost its color and her hands trembled. Without a word, she slipped the letter into her coat and walked away. From that moment on, everything changed, though the family didn't know it yet. Behind their usual calm smiles and elegant dinners, a secret was growing like a storm, and when it broke, it would test the strength of the Bridgerton name. Season 4 begins with peace in the Bridgerton household on the surface. At least Anthony and Kate are finally finding comfort in married life. The weight of duty that once held Anthony so tight has eased slightly, replaced by playful banter with Kate and a quiet understanding between them. They seem like a couple finally learning how to breathe together. Elsewhere, Colin returns from his travels, more confident and distant than before. Penelope, still reeling from the harsh words he once said, tries to keep her heart guarded. The tension between them is quiet but sharp. Eloise, meanwhile, is still cold toward Penelope after learning she was Lady Whistledown. She spends more time with books than people, pulling herself further away from the high society games that once amused her. The family moves through their days with grace, unaware that something bigger is already in motion. In the background, Lady Violet watches, it all with a heavy heart. When her children speak, she smiles. When they laugh, she joins them. But at night, she returns to her study alone, where the mysterious letter waits inside her drawer. The paper is worn as if handled too many times. She hasn't told a soul what's written inside. The words are too heavy, too dangerous. She knows this secret could shatter everything her late husband worked to build. One evening, while preparing for an upcoming social event, Lady Violet excuses herself early from dinner. Eloise notices her mother's distracted behavior. She asks Anthony if something's wrong, but he brushes it off. She's just tired, he says. But Lady Violet isn't tired, she's scared. Because the truth is, the letter wasn't just a warning. It was a reminder of a part of Edmund's life that she was never supposed to know. The days pass with dances, teas, and carriage rides. But small cracks begin to show. Lady Violet receives another letter, this time from someone signing only as J.H. She recognizes the initials. Her heart sinks. She keeps her children close, trying to protect them from something they don't even see coming. But secrets don't stay buried forever. And in the world of the ton, the smallest whisper can turn into a scandal overnight. At this point in the story, everything appears elegant and proper. The flowers bloom in the gardens, the orchestra plays in the drawing rooms, and the dresses shimmer in candlelight. But inside the Bridgerton home, something cold and silent is moving in the dark. And soon that silence will break with the sound of the past, knocking on the door. It started with a sound. Not a scream or a shout, but a quiet sob, muffled behind the closed door of Lady Violet's study. Eloise had only meant to borrow a book, but when she placed her hand on the doorknob, she froze. Her mother's voice trembled inside the room, speaking not to someone, but to something. "I never wanted this secret to return," Violet whispered. "Not after all these years?" The door creaked slightly under Eloise's grip, but she let go and stepped back, heart racing. She didn't understand what she'd just heard. But she knew one thing. Her mother was hiding something. The next day, Benedict caught Violet stepping out of a carriage alone. No footman, no companion, and no explanation. She claimed she'd visited an old friend from her youth, but something in her eyes betrayed her words. Benedict followed her the next time. What he saw shook him, his mother, entering a small, worn townhouse in the outer edge of Mayfair. The man who opened the door was a stranger, middle-aged, and when Violet saw him, she embraced him like someone lost had returned. Benedict didn't confront her, not yet. But he knew this wasn't just an old friend. Back at the estate, Colin found an old family portrait tucked deep in one of the library drawers. It was dated more than 25 years ago. Everyone looked younger except there was one face he didn't recognize. A young man, barely older than Anthony had been at the start of season 1, handsome but unfamiliar. Colin took the painting. To Lady Danbury, her reaction was swift and sharp. She ordered him to put it back and forget he ever saw it. But Colin couldn't forget. The mystery face seemed too familiar, almost like their father. Then came the whisper. First at Lady Cooper's tea, then at the modistes. The Bridgertons may not be what they seem, someone said behind a lace fan. There's talk of a child, a hidden one. A rumor spread, quiet and cruel, that Edmund Bridgerton had a child before his marriage. A child born outside of society's rules. Lady Featherington, always hungry for gossip, leaned in a little too eagerly when she heard the whispers. She asked questions, watched Violet too closely at the next party, and made sly remarks about family surprises, but Lady Violet didn't flinch. Her face remained calm, even when her heart thundered in her chest. Still, secrets have a scent. And by now, the entire ton could smell something was wrong. Late one evening, Eloise confronted her mother. Her voice was not angry, but deeply wounded. Is there something I should know? About father? About us? Lady Violet didn't answer at first. Instead, she sat down and stared out the window, the moonlight soft on her face. Your father was a good man, she said quietly, but like all men. He had a past, and that past is now at our door. A single name escaped her lips. Julian. Eloise didn't understand what that name meant, but she would soon, because Julian Hargrave had just arrived in London. Handsome, well-spoken, and strangely comfortable around the elite, he introduced himself. With charm, but the resemblance was undeniable. His eyes, his posture, the way he held his glass. Even Lady Danbury, who had trained herself to hide all reactions, looked stunned for a moment when she met him. The whispers became louder. And the Bridgertons were no longer just the Golden family, they were the center of a secret that threatened to change everything. Julian Hargrave did not arrive with trumpets or grand announcement. He walked into Lady Danbury's salon like a shadow slipping through sunlight, quiet, confident, and completely unknown. But something about him made people pause. Perhaps it was the way he carried himself, as if he belonged there. Or perhaps it was how his voice echoed just like Edmund Bridgerton's, warm, strong, and just a little sad. Whatever it was, by the end of his first evening in the Tun, everyone was talking about him. He introduced himself as a traveler, recently returned from the continent. Said he was looking for peace, maybe a fresh start. His story was vague, but his charm was sharp. Lady Danbury, watching from her usual corner, narrowed her eyes. She had seen many men try to charm their way into society. But this wasn't a performance. This was personal. She leaned toward Violet later that evening and whispered, "He looks like your late husband." Violet stiffened, then quickly changed the subject, but the truth couldn't be hidden forever. Julian wasn't just another guest. He had come for a reason. Benedict Bridgerton, the most open-hearted of the siblings, was the first to extend a real hand. The two met during an art showing, where Julian stared too long at a painting of Edmund Bridgerton, one that Benedict himself had painted years ago. "Did you know him?" Benedict asked, half joking. Julian looked at the portrait, then said softly, "I think I did." From that moment, things began to shift. Julian appeared at all the major events. The Queen noticed him. Lady Featherington sniffed around his background, trying to uncover any flaws. Penelope overheard someone mention the term bastard in connection with his name. That word was enough to create a spark, and in the Tun, sparks became wildfires. Julian remained calm. But behind closed doors he met privately with Lady Violet. The meeting was not cold, it was full of pain. "I did not come to ruin your family," Julian told her. "I came because I needed to know what kind of man my father truly was." Violet's eyes filled with tears. "He loved you," she whispered. "He just never had the chance to show it." She gave him a small box, one she had hidden away for years. Inside was a letter from Edmund written to the woman he had loved before Violet, a woman named Margaret Hargrave. The letter spoke of regret, of hope, and most of all, of a child he never got to meet. Julian took the letter, his hands shaking. "So it's true," he said. "He was my father." The secret was no longer rumor, it was fact. And the entire Bridgerton family would now have to face it. Colin was furious. "Why now? Why come here after all these years?" he shouted, but Benedict, ever the artist, saw it differently. "He's not asking for anything," he said. "He's just looking for a place to belong." Anthony, however, remained silent. The weight of being the eldest, the head of the family, crushed him. To him, this was not just about one man. It was about their father's legacy. "This changes everything," he said to Kate one night. "And I don't know if I'm ready for it." Meanwhile, Eloise began to spend time with Julian. She found his honesty refreshing. Unlike the men of the ton, Julian didn't hide behind masks. "People fear the truth," he told her. "But truth is the only thing that stays." As Julian's presence grew stronger, so did the questions. Would he claim the Bridgerton name? Did he want an inheritance? A title? Or simply closure? He answered that question at a garden gathering when Lady Featherington pressed him. "What is it you're after, Mr. Hargrave?" she asked, her tone sharp. Julian looked her in the eye and said, "Nothing. Just the truth. I've lived without it my whole life. Now I'm ready to live with it. But in the ton, truth is never just truth. It's scandal, it's power, it's danger. And in the next chapter, one misplaced word will threaten to bring down not just Julian, but the Bridgertons themselves. The night of Lady Bridgerton's grand spring ball began like any other. Lights twinkled in the gardens, soft music floated through the windows, and guests whispered behind silk gloves and jeweled fans. But beneath all the sparkle, the tension was thick. Every glance held suspicion. Every toast carried a hidden meaning. Because by now, the ton wasn't just curious about Julian Hargrave. They were waiting for the scandal to finally explode. Lady Whistledown had stayed silent, too silent. And that silence was a warning. Anthony Bridgerton stood near the fireplace, watching his guests dance while trying to keep his thoughts from boiling over. He had not spoken more than a few words to Julian all evening. Not because he hated the man, but because he didn't know how to face the ghost of the father he thought he knew. Edmund had always been his guide, his burden, his memory. And now that memory was being rewritten by someone who looked so much like him, it almost hurt to breathe. Meanwhile, Violet Bridgerton moved through the room with elegance, even as her heart pounded like a drum. She had never imagined this moment where her husband's past would arrive in the form of a grown man, standing among her children, not as a stranger, but as one of them. She glanced at Julian across the ballroom. He looked calm, but his hands were clenched behind his back. Then it happened. Lady Featherington, never one to miss a chance for spectacle, raised her glass and spoke loudly enough for every guest to hear. "To new family ... and old surprises." The room fell quiet. Whispers spread like wildfire. Someone dropped a glass. And all eyes turned to Julian. The Queen herself, seated nearby, tilted her head. "Mr. Hargrave," she said slowly, "I hear you've been the subject of great discussion. Tell me, what name do you truly claim?" Julian took a breath. The room was frozen, but he was steady. "My name is Julian Hargrave," he said. "I was born without title, without inheritance, and without answers. But I carry the blood of Edmund Bridgerton. I came here not for claim or coin, but for truth." The silence after his words was louder than any music. And then Lady Whistledown's latest pamphlet dropped that very night, delivered by footmen. In the middle of the event, guests opened it in waves, faces shifting from shock to disbelief to smug satisfaction. The front line read, "The Bridgertons' forgotten era, scandal buried and now reborn." It was over. The secret was out. The next morning, the Bridgerton family sat around their dining table, reading every painful word. "We cannot undo this," Violet said quietly. "But we can decide how to stand through it." Anthony wanted to fight. Colin wanted to leave. Eloise suggested silence, letting the rumors rot. But Benedict, ever the voice of balance, spoke up. "He is not our enemy," he said. "He's our father's son. That makes him part of us, whether we want it or not." As the family struggled to process the fallout, Julian packed his things. But before leaving, he handed Violet one final envelope. "He wrote it to you," he said. "He never sent it." Inside was Edmund's last letter. In it he spoke of his love for Violet, his fear of the past catching up to him, and his hope that if Julian ever came, she would treat him with kindness. Tears filled Violet's eyes. It was not forgiveness. But it was peace. In the end, Julian did not stay in the tun. He disappeared as quietly as he had arrived. But something had changed. Not just in the eyes of the public, but within the Bridgertons themselves. Anthony stood in the garden days later, watching the sun rise over the estate. Kate joined him. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said. He nodded, then whispered, "Father left us more than duty. He left us truth. It's our turn to decide what to do with it." As for Lady Whistledown, her final words the matter were simple yet powerful. Blood may bind, but choice defines. And just like that, the Bridgertons were never the same again.